So this lesson is about helping you to develop the actual writing of the extract questions. We've worked on the planning and preparation side. This is about trying to push up extract to whole text questions into level 4 and also potentially into level 5. For this, we're focusing on A Christmas Carol. Of course, it is relevant for Macbeth as well. And we're particularly focusing on Stave 2 as far as the extracts go. So, I'm starting with this question. Starting with this extract, how does Dickens present ideas about childhood in A Christmas Carol? And there, as you can see, is an extract that you'd recognise straight away as when we go and see Bell's family. Now, our first point of call is to think about that key idea, the big idea that's in the question, which of course is childhood here. And this is where it shows up the quality of your knowledge and your revision on the novella and on Dickens himself. So what we're looking for is ideas about childhood and exploring them, not just coming up with vague ideas of when childhood is in there. So the kind of thing that I would be thinking of, for example, how often the children are related to poverty. Not in this case, but across the book, an awful lot of the children we have are clearly poor. The fact that the children in the book take more of a role in transforming and redeeming Scrooge than probably the adults do, I would say. I mean, obviously Tiny Tim is a main example of that, but throughout you could argue that the carol singer sparks off something that comes to fruition in this Stave. You could argue that the boy at the end who gets the turkey is a representation of how he's changed. I think throughout you can see that children have a strong role in making Scrooge see things differently. I would also think that Dickens is making points here about society's attitudes towards and society's care for children. Obviously, things such as ignorance and want are particularly important in doing that. But I think all the way through, he's making a point to us as much as he is to Scrooge. And then I thought to myself, okay, who are the children in A Christmas Carol? And that's the list I've come up with. Remember, Turkey Boy is not a phrase you'd want to use in your essays. It is just a shorthand at the moment to remind us of the boy who goes and gets the turkey for him at the end. Now, having all of those together, first of all, obviously is something that when you approach the exam would already be there in your head because you already have done a lot of work preparing and thinking about this as an area. And so that allows you to start with the planning. Now, we've done a lot of work on planning, so there's a reminder coming up of what you do, but I'm not going to spend much time on it. First of all, so of course, the first step we talk about is adapting the question, so that you start by answering on the whole text, not just focusing on the extract, which gives you a much stronger argument. And there's an example of how that might look. Transforming it to, taking out starting with this extract and transforming it to what does Dickens have to say about childhood in A Christmas Carol. So, once you've done that, what you're looking for is a clear answer. Remember, level 4, clear. And then a but answer, something that's more thought through. Okay, not going to spend any time on that now. I am going to suggest that you're going to need to do that in a minute. Okay, second of all, then you've got applying your argument to the extract. So once you've got the argument that you've come up with, you're going through and you are going to underline or highlight key examples, and this is important, of where Dickens puts across his ideas, not what the ideas are. Remember, we've said that several times here. We're not looking for the what as much as the how in the extract. It's noteworthy that looking for patterns of images where you've got similar types of images used several times, or similar types of language, semantic fields, things such as that can be very useful, but also patterns of approach. where he's doing several of his Dickens. He does an awful lot of obvious approaches, obvious techniques, where he's using several of those to make the same point or similar points in the extract. Then you group the examples together so they fit the two sections of your argument. Of course, at this point you can adjust the argument if you feel it's not fitting the extract particularly. And then we move on to considering how these ideas are developed across the whole novella. And remember, the key that we've worked on is the idea of seeing the novella as a whole and seeing how ideas are developed. So thinking about this in relationship to how ideas about childhood start, how they continue over the entire book, how the things that we're thinking out develop, and what this is an example of. Okay, that's all stuff we've worked on. So I want you now to pause this video in a second and to have a go at doing this again for this question. Okay, you can pause it now, and when you've finished doing the preparation, unpause and move on. Okay, so on to the main part of the lesson today, the main skill that we're trying to develop. And we're going to start with thinking about level 4, getting into level 4. Remember, level 4 marks 16 through to 20, cover grades 5 to quite high up in grade 6. So in order to achieve this, remember the key word is clear and effectively. And we've got our 4 AOs, well, 3 AOs there, but our 4 broken down AOs that would be annotated by your examiner and what they're looking for you to get the marks. So how does that work in terms of writing the answer? First of all, starts with that clear answer, the argument to the question that's set up at the beginning. The something but something idea. So let's again pause the video to give you a chance to just quickly write down the opening argument, which should already be planned in the something but something format, but your focus is on the idea that if I read this, I would see that you are clearly answering the question. Okay, pause now and get that written down. Okay, now this isn't what I expect you to come up with, but here's an example of a kind of a level 4 argument that you might have that kind of maybe starts to push a bit further later on. It starts with something straightforward. Ideas about childhood. He presents childhood as a source of joy and happiness. Okay, but then it goes a bit further. Okay, that's what it is, but he also warns us of the dangers of neglecting children. And that gives us a little bit further to go. Right? Second part, a little bit more challenging to do, and that's important because that's going to provide us with the second half of the answer where we're going to try and push your marks further on. Okay, so from this we move to the extract itself, and here our focus really, I suppose, is trying to achieve AO2, to clearly explain the methods that Dickens is using and to clearly explain how they create meaning, how they create an answer to the question. So here's an example then for you. In the extract, Bell's children are portrayed as fun so that we see them bringing joy to the household. Now, please note there the clarity, okay, in this extract, Bell's children, fun, right? Following on, building on what the overall argument was. But most importantly, I would say, is the so that. This thing that we've talked about many times before of foregrounding the effect. So that, what's the effect? We see them bringing joy to the household. So it's not just that they are fun, it's that he's doing this so we see it's the children that bring joy into the household. So do remember that, foregrounding the effect. There we go into the detail now. And because it's AO2, if we pick the right examples out that do deal with Dickens' techniques, then what we will see is that we can focus on that in our writing. And you see here straight away, it's Dickens' contrasts. It's not just bringing in an example of what happens, it's what Dickens doing. Dickens contrasts the description of them as a herd who are behaving like animals with the mother and daughter's laughter to make us see that even if they seem out of control, the impact they have on others is worth it. So we're going for specific technique there, contrast with particular examples. And you can see that I'm again trying to clearly explain how that method works. That the herd makes them seem like animals, because obviously it's a word that's describing cows, cattle. And then the idea that having put the mother and daughter laughing in response to that makes it seem that even though they're out of control, the impact they have on others is worth it. So a clear explanation of what Dickens is doing and how it creates the meaning I'm talking about. And then, not leaving it there, following it up with another example. Then, and the then works very well in terms of suggesting he keeps that idea going. He makes sure we get the point by describing this as sport, so that we focus on this as something to enjoy. Same thing there, just a simple description, choice of word, and explaining the meaning of that. To round off this bit here, we're looking at AO3 now, showing clear understanding of Dickens' ideas. Having looked through the method and how they create meaning, it's now bring it to an interpretation of how this makes points about ideas about childhood. So, Dickens is making it clear to us that having children brings happiness to the house, especially at Christmas, and that this comes through their childlike behaviour. Again, the focus there is clarity. What's the point he's making? How does that relate to ideas about childhood? Now, the AO1 refs is most likely to come in the next section when we're dealing with how this develops in the rest of the novella. So this section then following on, again, we'll start with an AO1 task, a response to the question that Dickens explores this association of children with bringing happiness further in the following stave. Now again, look at a couple of details there. This association of children is how the connection is brought up between what we've just discussed and what he's about to do. By using the word further and also in the following stave, we get that sense of development and change. How it begins with this idea, he's doing it, this idea in Bell's children, and then this will go even further in the next stave with these series of joyful Christmases. And that sets up what I'm going to discuss. Now for the refs, I'm going to focus in on one particular one. I'm going to focus in on the crack. And what I want you to notice is this idea of references. You can see there is not one direct quotation. Now, that's not because I haven't done my work and don't know the text well enough. It's because there's not really a moment in here where the direct quotation would actually help. But what there is a tight focus on specific moments. So the Cratchit's Christmas is focused on family, and we see how the children contribute to the happiness of this. Dickens describes their heavy involvement in preparing the meal. Again, there is my reference to the text. I don't think I need to now throw in quotations about Peter and knocking the potatoes about on a saucepan, because I don't think that's going to help. The focus on it's a heavy involvement, not just they're involved, is as good a reference as anything. It's precise. And then I carry on in explaining that, so I'm using it to support the answer. Their heavy involvement shows them to be a vital part of the day, but the fun is still there. And I'm going to now look at the fun. Here's another specific example, Martha. Even though Martha has grown up and is working, and that detail shows my knowledge of Martha, but also shows the importance of this, she still has the joy of childhood when she tries to hide from her father to pretend she isn't there and surprise him. Apologies about the excess apostrophe that seems to have cropped in there. Once again, the reference is clear there. It's that moment when Martha tries to hide from her father as he comes home to pretend she isn't there and surprise him. That's clearly an element of fun. The comment that shows that supports the answer with it comes just before it actually, where it says it's showing she still has the joy of childhood, even though she is grown up and is working. So the joy of childhood is there even for someone who's one of the older children. So I think you'll see that that is quite an effective way of developing the idea. And it means I'm doing exactly what the question is asking. I've started with the extract, and I've looked how, starting with the extract, I've looked at how the idea of children as fun, bringing joy to the household, is used in the extract and then developed over the rest of the book. Finally, a little bit of AO3 at the end to make absolutely clear, just like before, that I'm showing understanding of Dickens' ideas. This is one of several examples in this stave, just to make the point, there's plenty more I could say, which Dickens uses to make sure joy and children are seen as being one and the same. So this version of the answer, obviously is only halfway through or a third of the way through or whatever, but this version is heading for level 4 across all of the AOs, a 20, a grade 6. This is now time for you to pause and have a go if you're going to focus on trying to make sure you achieve level 4. If you're trying to make sure you achieve level 4, you're going to pause this in a second, and you're now going to take a different idea that came from your plan, and you're going to attempt to do exactly this, using this as a model for your own idea. Now, that's unless, of course, your focus is to try and move to level 5, in which case, then let the video carry on, and we will go on to level 5 in a second. It's also possible you're going to want to try this for level 4 and then have a look at level 5 and see if you can manage that as well. I'll leave that up to you. But if you're going to do the level 4, pause now and have a go for an idea for your own. Okay, so if we go into level 5 now, the change in each of those objectives, as you can see, is clarity becomes thoughtful and developed. Being clear and relevant becomes thoughtful and developed. So it's saying, I don't just want clarity anymore. I want you to put a little bit more thought into it, and I want you to develop your response in a bit more detail. Now, as examiners, they tell us that the difference between level 4 and level 5 is quite clear. Level 4 really is something that probably can be achieved if you listen to what your teacher has told you or other people's interpretations and just do what's being asked. So level 5 will always require you to think a little bit for yourself and have an understanding. Not that it has to be original, but the technique will show that you are understanding and thoroughly developing what you've come up with. So have a look at the change now to the overall argument. It's very similar, but it just goes a little bit deeper, particularly in the second part. So it starts with the idea that childhood is the source of Scrooge's transformation and redemption, rather than just it brings joy and happiness. Okay, so it takes that idea that the joy and happiness is going to bring about Scrooge's transformation and redemption. The but point, here the yet point, is really one that's intended to push to the highest parts of level 5 and maybe even open opportunities for 6. That he's also stressing our need to embrace their spirit is as strong as Scrooge's is. So in other words, Dickens is really talking to us as much as Scrooge to say that we need to embrace childhood and we can be transformed and even redeemed. So that's quite a complex idea. Okay, let's have a look at how the extract section might. Now, the first thing you might notice is it doesn't just start in the extract. Dickens does. And it doesn't mean you can't do that for level 5. It's just that if you look at the beginning of this, it means the focus is far more, not just on the fact that I'm talking about the extract, it's on a specific aspect of it. It's the picture of Belle's home life. So it's not just talking about Belle's children, it's stating that this is about Belle's home life. And this picture is dominated by the children. And here comes the so that, doesn't use so that, it uses the participle, an ing verb instead. contrasting the joy they bring with the sad and lonely life Scrooge is leading after his loss of Belle. So that's the soda, that's foregrounding the effect. The picture of the home life is dominated by the children. What's the effect? It contrasts the joy they bring with the sad and lonely life Scrooge is leading. Same point as last time, just going further in our understanding of it. Now, again, the Dickens contrasts idea goes into a bit more depth here. The listing of the children's actions creates a sense of the pure joy of their lives. Now, I'm not giving evidence of that, I'm just saying it happens. And obviously this is the examples we're giving are part of that listing. So what I'm doing here for level 5 rather than level 4 is, rather than just taking one small example, I'm showing an understanding that this example is part of a bigger thing that he's doing that creates a sense of pure joy. So again, it's a more thoughtful and definitely a more developed understanding of what he's doing. Again, if you're not completely understanding, look at the example, the extract itself, and see what I mean about the list of what they're doing. Okay, now I'll go into the particular detail. Portraying them on the one hand as young brigands attacking the adults. I think at level 5, that to me was a better example than a herd, although herd could easily be used, right? But, and here's the important thing, undercutting this with the mother and daughter's laughter to turn it into play. Okay, so my analysis there of what's going on is kind of quite subtle. You might think, I haven't said anything about young brigands. Well, I have, because I said they're attacking the adults. You see, I know that brigands are like outlaws, you know, bandits of some kind. So attacking shows that I'm making the point that that's why he's using that idea. But I think the key is here, rather than just say it's contrasting, I'm making more of a point about what Dickens is trying to do. He is undercutting it. So I'm rather saying that, rather than saying, oh, he does this and then contrast it with that, I'm saying he then, after talking about these young brigands doing the attack, he deliberately goes, here comes the laughter, to point out to us that this is just play. And then after the comma, here comes my examination of how that's creating meaning. What play, what children do when they are left to be themselves. So making it quite clear that that is this sense of joy. They're left to be themselves, so they play and they bring laughter to the family. Now, again, when I build with a second point here, rather than just going to something similar that happens again afterwards, like I did with sport, here now I'm thinking again about Dickens' technique, and I've come to the idea of the narrator. One of the things that we've talked about, the narrator's voice, a technique that Dickens uses a lot. And so I go again, like with the picture of Belle's home life dominated by the children, the excitement in the narrator's voice as he describes how he would have dearly liked to join in is almost directing us to agree with him, while accepting as an adult he's past this. So I'm not just saying he uses the narrator's voice, I'm straight into the effect of it. The excitement is clear, and the excitement, as I'm saying there, is making us agree with him, but at the same time accepting that unfortunately we're past that as an adult. I've used the quote dearly liked, and again, rather than make a big deal of what's being said, it just is obviously saying, if he's excited and he would have dearly liked to join in, it's saying, well, come on, you know, you agree with me. Then, of course, this comes to what basically is a version of the AO3, this time thoughtfully considering. So you've seen how the explanation, the clear explanation, has turned into examining the methods by showing my understanding of it and some more thought about it and examining how they create meaning. Now this is how the clear understanding of Dickens' ideas turns into a thoughtful consideration. And considering rather than understanding requires a little bit more of that tentative idea, maybe. Yeah, what it seems to be doing. So here's the point I'm making. This whole passage builds up to his final statement that as a man, he should know the value of such childish fun, hinting to us that Scrooge needs to learn this lesson too. So rather than just sum up, Dickens is trying to say this. I'm saying all of this is building up to this statement at the end. And these are the word hinting shows that, again, I am considering the ideas. I'm not saying that's it, that's what he means. I'm saying it feels like there's a hint at the end when he says that really he feels he should know the value of such childish fun, the narrator. That the hint in our head is that Scrooge should as well. Okay, I hope that helps you understand what we mean by examining the methods and the meaning, and thereby thoughtfully considering Dickens' ideas. But let's have a look at how that then would change in terms of the rest. Again, at the beginning, we've changed to a phrase immediately after this extract. Now, that's partly because I've changed to a different example. Rather than just go to something that happens in the next stanza, I'm starting to think more in terms of an interpretation. You see in AO1 refs, that's the key word there. It's integrating references into an interpretation. I'm interpreting how he's building this across. So I'm going to start with what happens straight after this, which is Belle's husband coming in. I'm then going to go to the fact that he introduces Belle's husband talking about Scrooge being alone to create that contrast. I'm then going to go to what happens after that when Scrooge attacks the Ghost of Christmas Past, which shows how upset he is by this, and therefore makes the point about ideas about childhood, really. And then it moves further on to me suggesting how that transformation is shown to us, and how it's particularly shown to involve this kind of childish fun. So that's the process. Immediately after this extract, the entrance of Belle's husband with presents takes the fun to new levels. When and how it's related to before, what and the impact, the effect up front. At which point, then, moving on, Dickens introduces the contrasting picture, and contrast again rather than having to spend ages explaining it, of Scrooge sat quite alone, working on Christmas Eve as Marley lies dying. Now, there is a quotation that I've remembered, yeah? And it's because it's not just the fact he's alone, it's quite alone, which obviously stresses how different that is from the life that Belle and her husband and her family are living. But I still want to carry that interpretation forward. This vision of the past, okay, because remember, this is Stave 2, this is the past, reminds us of the Scrooge that we saw in the first Stave. And you can see that that interpretation is me using AO3. You can see this is why all three of them are lit up at the same time. Because yes, I'm using references to the rest of the text, but as you saw, I just said the contrasting picture of Scrooge doing this, Dickens introducing it at this point. I'm looking at Dickens' methods as well as I'm going. And when I'm talking about here that this vision reminds us of the Scrooge we saw in the first Stave, it is me thoughtfully considering what his point is, what he's trying to do. Then it carries on, of course, with the precedes, another method, Scrooge physically pinning down the Ghost of Christmas Past, an apt reference integrated in, to shut off his light because he is so upset by it. There's how it's creating meaning. It's clear his view is beginning to transform. That's my consideration of Dickens' ideas. He's obviously going to transform because he's trying to shut him up about this. You know, the Scrooge of Stave 1 would have just said bar humbug and left it to go. Then it carries on of, okay, there's a possibility here that I'm moving slightly away from childhood if I'm not careful. So I bring back what the point is. In the third and fifth staves, again, like immediately after this extract, or at which point, or precedes, it's making very clear where I'm talking about. In the third and fifth staves, we then see that Scrooge begins to have some of this childish excitement that the narrator values. Okay, I think there's words left out of my typing there, but never mind. Okay, so there's a point that's being made. Scrooge begins to enjoy himself, and it's this childish excitement that we've just had from the narrator. And then here's the specific apt marked references integrated in, enthusiastically joining in Fred's games, that's third, and dancing around on the real Christmas morning, that's in the fifth stave. And that leaves me with an AO3 bold statement at the end: the lessons of childhood are the central spark for his change. Going to go to level 5. That's now what you need to do. You need to now attempt this for a section again on a different point, trying to do the things I've said. That's if you haven't attempted for level 4, or if you did attempt it for level 4 and you're trying to push a bit further. Now, all of this work that you've been doing so far with the pauses and the work in between is basically, as far as I can see, with this being half an hour of me talking, basically is both lessons today. There'll be a separate video for you for tomorrow's lesson, which will be focused on language. But what you need to complete for today then is the plan, the opening argument, and a section, either in level 4 or in level 5, or potentially both if need be. Now, I'm not necessarily going to need to take that in from you until I see you next week. So I'm quite happy to wait for that till Wednesday. Next week you will be doing a timed essay on A Christmas Carol. So if you want that looked at, you may wish to try and send it to me at some point today, and I may be able to have a look at it tomorrow and give you a little bit of feedback on it. But that's the focus for our 2 lessons today. If there are any questions, I obviously have my emails open. Please do contact me about it.